You swipe your card. The payment clears. You walk away thinking the transaction is finished. But the moment your card touches the machine, money starts leaking. Quietly, invisibly, automatically. Not from the store. Not from your bank. From you. Every coffee. Every grocery run. Every online order. A small slice is taken each time, and you never see it leave. You were told digital payments made life easier. Faster. Cleaner. Smarter. What no one told you is that convenience has a toll booth, and you've been paying it for years without realizing it. This isn't about fraud. It isn't about hidden fees on your statement. And it isn't about bad spending habits. It's about a company that earns money every time money moves, without lending a dollar, risking capital, or touching cash at all. And once you see how it works, you'll realize your money has been taxed long before it reaches anything you actually buy. So who gets paid every time your money simply moves? Most people believe taxes come from governments, and fees come from banks. That belief feels logical. You see the line items. You see the statements. But the largest payment system in the world doesn't show up that way. Visa doesn't issue your card. It doesn't lend you money. It doesn't decide your interest rate. And it doesn't even move the money itself. Yet Visa earns a cut from nearly every digital transaction on Earth. Billions of swipes per day. Across countries, currencies, and banks, all feeding one network. Here's the part that feels counterintuitive. If Visa disappeared tomorrow, banks could still lend. Stores could still sell. You would still want to buy things. But the entire digital payment system would slow, fragment, and break, because Visa isn't a company you interact with. It's the invisible rail beneath the system. You were taught to think value comes from products, from apps, from innovation you can see. But Visa's power comes from something quieter. Permission. Every time money moves digitally, someone has to approve that movement. Verify it. Root it. Set the rules. Visa positioned itself as the referee, not the player. And referees get paid regardless of who wins. The genius of the system is that it never feels like a choice. You don't opt into Visa every day. You inherit it. By the time you're old enough to swipe, the rails are already built. Convenience feels free, but systems that feel inevitable are often the most expensive. So how did one company become the toll booth for global money? Most people believe Visa makes money because people borrow too much. That belief is wrong. Visa doesn't care if you pay your balance in full. It doesn't care if you miss a payment. It doesn't care if interest rates go up or down. Those risks belong to banks. Visa gets paid the moment a transaction is approved. When you swipe, tap, or click pay, 4 players appear instantly. Your bank, the merchant's bank, the merchant, and Visa, sitting in the middle. Visa doesn't hold the money. It doesn't lend the money. It simply authorizes the movement. That authorization is worth billions. Visa charges tiny percentages, fractions of a percent, so small they feel harmless. But those fractions repeat endlessly. Every transaction, every day, every country. That's the belief break. We're trained to fear big fees. Visa mastered small ones. A few cents on a coffee doesn't trigger resistance. A fraction on groceries doesn't cause outrage. But multiplied across trillions of dollars, those cents become one of the most profitable business models ever built. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Visa's revenue grows when the world goes cashless, when payments become frictionless, when money moves faster and more often. You think speed benefits you? It does, emotionally. But financially, speed benefits the toll collector. Visa engineered a system where growth doesn't depend on innovation cycles or product launches. It depends on human behavior continuing as usual. As long as people buy things, Visa wins. And because Visa doesn't take credit risk, it keeps its margins even when economies collapse. Banks panic in recessions. Visa just keeps counting swipes. So why hasn't anyone replaced a system this powerful? At this point, the obvious question is simple. Why hasn't someone built an alternative? The answer is uncomfortable because it mirrors something personal. Visa isn't powerful because it's better technology. It's powerful because everyone already agreed to use it. Banks trust Visa because other banks trust Visa. Merchants accept Visa because customers expect it. Customers expect it because merchants accept it. That loop locks itself. To replace Visa, a challenger wouldn't just need better software. It would need global trust, instant adoption, and regulatory approval, all at the same time. That's not innovation. That's coordination on a planetary scale. This is where the fear appears. You don't consciously choose Visa. You inherit it. Your salary enters the system. Your rent exits the system. Your groceries pass through it. The system feels neutral because it's invisible. But invisibility is what makes it unchallenged. The moment something becomes infrastructure, questioning it feels impractical. Cash feels outdated. Checks feel slow. Alternatives feel risky. Visa doesn't need to convince you. The world does it for them. And the more digital life becomes, the deeper that dependence goes. Subscriptions, streaming, apps, international payments. Every layer adds more swipes, more movement, more tolls. You fear complexity. Visa sells simplicity, but simplicity always has an owner. And once the system owns the rails, everyone else just pays to ride. So what's the hidden rule that makes Visa nearly untouchable? The hidden rule that protects Visa isn't technology. It's positioning. Visa didn't try to own money. It tried to own movement. Banks fight over who holds your balance. Fintech companies fight over apps and features. Governments fight over regulation and control. Visa stepped sideways and claimed the space no one was guarding: the rails. Once Visa became the default network, power stopped being visible. It became structural. Here's what makes that terrifyingly effective. If a bank fails, regulators intervene. If a lender collapses, someone absorbs the loss. If a fintech app breaks, users switch. But if the rails break, everything stops. That's why Visa isn't treated like a normal company. It's treated like infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't need to advertise. It doesn't need to persuade. It doesn't need to change your behavior. It simply needs to exist reliably. Visa earns trust not by being loved, but by never being noticed. Downtime is the only failure that matters. And because Visa never touches the money, it avoids the heaviest regulations. It doesn't face credit risk. It doesn't face balance sheet stress. It doesn't face runs. It takes a toll without being blamed for the traffic. This is the turning point most people miss. Visa isn't powerful because it controls people. It's powerful because it controls coordination. Billions of independent actors, banks, merchants, consumers, all synchronized around one network. Once that happens, choice disappears without force. You think you're paying for convenience. In reality, you're paying for stability at scale. And systems that guarantee stability become too important to challenge. So, what does this kind of invisible power mean for you personally? The lesson in Visa's empire isn't about payments. It's about leverage. Most people chase ownership of things. Products, brands, assets you can point to. Visa shows that the deepest leverage comes from owning flow. When you own flow, you don't need to predict outcomes. You profit from movement itself. That applies far beyond money. Platforms that own attention don't care what content wins. They care that content keeps moving. Marketplaces don't care who sells the product. They care that transactions keep happening. Visa's brilliance was realizing that human behavior doesn't need to be controlled, only routed. You don't need to stop people from spending. You just need to stand where spending passes through. Here's the personal implication. You don't need to be the smartest player in the room. You don't need to win every decision. You need to position yourself where activity compounds in your favor. That might mean skills that sit between systems, roles that coordinate rather than compete, businesses that facilitate instead of produce. Visa didn't invent money. It didn't invent commerce. It inserted itself between them. Once you see that pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. And when you understand the system, the fear dissolves. You stop blaming yourself for losing small amounts repeatedly. You recognize the toll booths around you. Awareness doesn't remove the toll, but it restores agency. So, where else are invisible tolls quietly shaping your future? Visa's power matters more today than ever before. The world is moving toward fewer physical transactions, not more. Cash is disappearing. Digital wallets are expanding. Cross-border payments are accelerating. Every trend points in one direction. More movement, fewer frictions. That means more rails, not fewer. And Visa sits at the center of them. New technologies promise disruption. Crypto, real-time payments, central bank digital currencies. But here's the uncomfortable reality. Most systems don't remove tolls. They simply change who collects them. Even when payment methods evolve, coordination doesn't vanish. Rules still matter. Verification still matters. Trust still has to live somewhere. Visa doesn't need to dominate the future. It only needs to remain embedded. And as long as money moves faster than awareness, invisible systems will keep deciding who gets paid first. If power stays hidden, how many systems are shaping you right now? This channel exists for one reason: not to create fear, not to sell shortcuts, but to make systems visible. When you understand how power actually works, confusion fades. You stop blaming yourself for rules you never chose. And you start thinking differently about where leverage lives. Visa didn't win by working harder. It won by choosing position. That lesson applies everywhere. In careers, in businesses, in the systems you move through daily. If you want clarity, not hype, you're in the right place. Because once you understand the system, you stop fearing it. You learn how to move within it. What system are you participating in without seeing it clearly?